Let's try to tease this apart a bit tonight. Joining me to do that is Chloe Demrovsky. She's the president and CEO of Disaster Recovery Institute, DRI International. Chloe, Lee County waited to order evacuations. Was that reasonable? Was it botched?
That's a big question, and there's going to need to be an investigation there. But of course, the reason they waited may have been because they were sort of on the edge of the cone of where the storm was expected to make landfall. Now, a lot of questions will be asked around that, about how that decision was made as we go into lessons learned, because really what should have happened is they should have been following their procedures. And Lee County has hundreds of pages of well-detailed procedures for how to call an evacuation, how to run an evacuation. All of that is decided long in advance by emergency response officials who are professionals who do this for hurricane after hurricane. They debrief, they talk, they have lessons learned, and then they put together these detailed procedures. Why do you do that? So that we don't make snap decisions in panic mode when something is upon us. That is not a framework for good decision making. You need to think about this in advance, and then you have the rule book, you have the playbook, you have a plan to follow when something like this happens. You have informed decision makers using standards and best practices and policies so that they can follow these to make these kinds of decisions.
People don't have to evacuate just because the order comes out, but does the declaration require some people to respond? I'm thinking nursing homes, the order comes out, they're compelled to move people or something like that.
Yeah, there's lots of details about who has to move and who has to offer shelter and all of these things, but you called it right, which is that people don't have to evacuate, and that's why there's so much sensitivity on whether or not to trigger that evacuation call, because people don't want to be accused of crying wolf. Officials don't want to be crying wolf, and then people are saying, you know what, I evacuated last time and nothing happened, I'm going to ride it out this time. But really, you know, going back to those procedures, Lee County was they were predicting storm surge of up to 7 feet in Lee County, even if they weren't in the cone directly. And so if they had been following their procedures, they would have evacuated those areas on Monday instead of waiting until Tuesday morning because of that storm surge. And that's really important. I know this falls into like a discretionary decision rather than an operational decision. And so there may be some liability protection for those officials, but we're talking about people's lives here. And so it's really important that they use the best judgment possible, the best processes possible, so that they can really protect people's lives.
You know the procedure so much better than everybody else. So again, the 25-year-old who decides they're going to stay in their home or not, jump in the car when they realize it's bad, that's one thing. I'm thinking of the 85-year-old woman who can't get out of her bed and really needs help. Are there some technicalities here to where if this is declared, XYZ has to happen for those who are most vulnerable?
Yeah, so that's where the shelters come into play. You can't compel people out of their homes, but there are lots of hotlines, resources, and first responders who are ready to help people to evacuate who might need additional assistance. There are going to be volunteers. There's going to be family members and neighbors and friends. You know, people who need additional assistance should be asking for that. Those people who choose to ride out the storm, again, you know, they can't, the government's not going to compel them out of their homes, but really if you're in an evacuation area, you absolutely should heed those warnings. And then you should look around and see if maybe somebody needs help. Does somebody need a ride? Is there somebody who you know, who you live next door to, who might be vulnerable, who needs that additional assistance? If you can't offer it yourself, can you help them to access those local resources that might be able to help them to make those life-saving decisions, because we all have a stake in preparedness.
Chloe, the local officials are saying basically no notes here. This was handled well. This was, you know, by the book. Is there a concern maybe about liability, that if they admit they make mistakes, they open themselves up?
Well, there could be liability in general, but it's unlikely that they are going to be considered to be liable, because this kind of falls under sovereign immunity. So that is still very much alive and well, and that protects government officials in a lot of cases in case of a decision that they make that goes wrong. They're being protected from tort claims, for example, certainly from criminal proceedings. And so this protects them in the act of a discretionary decision of the administrative state. So operational is something that they planned for in advance and they decided on a policy. This is a discretionary choice. It's a question of judgment by those officials in the Emergency Operations Center. And that's exactly what sovereign immunity is created to protect those individuals so that they can make a decision without fear of liability in that moment. Because you also don't want your local emergency response officials to be paralyzed in their decision making because they're so afraid of liability. So that's why that exists. But it also can create, some moral hazard there if they think that they're not protected. But they're not totally protected, and we will see what happens. Obviously, there is going to be an in-depth investigation into this moving forward.
Chloe Demrovsky, President and CEO of Disaster Recovery Institute International, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Chance.